Hi, I'm Dusk. Welcome to Realm of the Sacred Roots. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. I wanted to talk to you today about a friend of mine in junior high school and high school. We'll call her Terry for now. She was in a satanic cult, and here's how the story went. I was a loner for the most part in junior high school and high school. Always the weird one out who always liked to wear black, a little different. Well, I was drawn to Terry and she was drawn to me because she was very similar, kind of gothic, for the most part, stayed to herself. So we ended up becoming best friends. Well, it was interesting because of her being in a satanic cult and the students knowing this, she would get teased a lot. Well, one day we were walking into the library. We walked to the very far corner of the library. We were looking at books. Well, there was a crowd that came in behind us and they were making fun of her and they were teasing her and chanting mean things about her being in this satanic cult and being a devil worshiper. And I was looking at the books on the shelves uh, toward the wall, and she turned around toward the crowd. And I turned around, so I'm facing her back. And a few seconds later, I see everybody, their eyes open up, the crowd, and then they started to scream and they ran out of the library. Well, it was the weirdest thing to me. I didn't know what was going on. So Terry turned around and she looked at me and everything was fine. I said, "What was that about?" And she said, "I don't know." And we went about our business. It wasn't until later on did someone in the crowd come up to me and say, "Do you know what happened in the library?" And I said, "No. All I know was the crowd came in. They were making fun of her, and then they screamed and ran out." And she told me that when Terry turned around, her face changed and her eyes turned red. And it just scared the hell out of them. And they basically ran out of the library. And so later on, I asked Terry, I said, "Terry, here's what I heard. What happened?" And she said, "I don't know." She basically never claimed that any changes happened, whether she knew or not, or it was a spirit within her defending her. She never admitted or took responsibility for what happened. We just knew everyone ran out. So ever since then, of course, I was even more intrigued with, with her and this supposed cult that she belonged to. So I'd ask her questions about the cult. I'd ask her what they did. Now, mind you, this is back in the late 80s, early 90s. I'd ask her what they did and things like that. And she would whisper to me. We were pretty young. I mean, if you would think middle school, she'd whisper and tell me that, sacrifices were being made of all sorts, all kinds of sacrifices were being made. And she was specific when she told me these things, saying that there were only a select few that could attend. Because, of course, I asked if I could go because I was just that type of curious child. She said, excuse me, that only a few select could actually attend and be present. So, of course, I was even more intrigued. But I ended up meeting her mother and her father. She said her mother was a witch and her father was a warlock. Now, back then, that didn't mean much to me. It just sounded pretty like Harry Potter like. But I thought it was interesting. Well, probably, I don't know, a few months later, she came to school and I said, "Hi, Terry. How's it going?" And da 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 da, just like we normally would. And she said, "I'm not Terry. I'm Jerry. I'm Terry's twin sister." And so I looked at her pretty much knowing she's just playing a game with me. This is just a joke. So I kind of started playing along with her. And then the next day, hey, Terry. And she said, no, 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 it's still Jerry. Terry's out. And so this went on to the point where I actually started to look at her physical features, trying to figure out, did she really have a twin or not? Because it was so real and she seemed so convinced I anything is possible at this point. She could absolutely have a twin, and I know there's Terry and Jerry. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And for years, I just let it go and went with it, whatever it was, whether I thought she had lost it or I, whichever. I just believed her and just kept it moving, basically. Well, time went on, and I went away for a few years. I joined the military. I came back into town and I looked for Terry, and I wanted to catch up and see how things were going. And she proceeded to tell me, I never asked about her supposed twin sister, but she proceeded to tell me, I saw a couple of her kids, her babies that were there, that she told me she had a couple of kids that the father took and she's never seen them since then. And, he just took off and disappeared and moved to another state. So I thought that was interesting, but okay, that's fine. And that was the last time I ever saw her. Well, it wasn't until years later, until I started studying. At the time, it was spiritual warfare and or demons and things of that sort. Did I start to read about, and here's a disclaimer, not I'm not talking about all Satanic Cult, but I'm talking about the one that Terry told me about. Um, but I did realize that there was a common theme that ran among some of these cults, and um, that's what was so interesting about Terry and Jerry's story is that when they're young, they are sometimes brainwashed into believing that this is a normal life, and they are baby makers and they have babies, and their birth and their death, neither are recorded, and they are used for other purposes, most likely for sacrificial purposes. So, with that said, it started to make sense because the psychology of it is basically that some of these baby breeders end up forming multiple personalities in order to deal with the horrors of what they've seen, of what they've gone through in some of these underground or in some of these cults. And so they develop multiple personalities and disassociate from their everyday life due to their trauma. So when I started to study this, I realized that's exactly what I was dealing with when I was younger with Terry and Jerry. Was that she was having babies and basically checking out. So when I say, "Hey, Terry," and no, it's Jerry, it's her twin sister, she had to split, or she had to break out into this other personality in order to deal with the everyday atrocities of what was happening in her own life. So I thought it was an interesting story to share. I hesitated initially about sharing the story, but I thought that if some of you knew of someone when growing up or even now that has similar stories or those type of issues, um, maybe you'll be better equipped now to identify that. Um, in other people, and know what you're working with and know what you're dealing with. It's interesting, even though we're spirit workers, sometimes we're also counselors, and we may not be psychologists, um, but it still helps being able to identify certain things, and know what you're dealing with, know where you're at. So I hope this story was enlightening for some of you. It is always going to be a very interesting story to me, and a milestone in my young life that I'll always be able to look back at, and hope that Terry is doing better today than she was back then. I'm hoping she got the help that she needed. Okay, well, please like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe, and look forward to my next videos coming soon. Thanks again for watching.